Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nikki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about our favorite craft books. And we're doing this now so that maybe if you want to get somebody a gift for a holiday, you can do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what a better gift than a book. And one that...
Well, a retreat would be the best gift.
Yes.
But a book would be second best.
That is so true. And so keep your eyes out for that giving opportunity. But
yes.
Anything writing related that's going to enrich your craft or your spirit or your being encouraged is always a huge plus. But what do you guys think about craft books just in general?
Stephanie, what do you think?
I have some favorites and I have some that are useless. They can be amazing or they can be very frustrating. And I actually think they're kind of individual to each writer too, because of how we think, how we figure things out. So that's why it's good to have a selection of them. And I'm glad we're talking about a selection because I've found that some that I'm in love with, somebody else will be like, oh, that didn't help me at all. So
I think that's totally true because there have been some people who just raved. I won't say it out loud, but it's a particular book that seems popular. And I read it, and honestly, I just disagreed with a lot of what the person said. And they're just a famous writer who has put out a book on craft. And I think that you really have to be careful and go with the ones that help you improve your craft the way you want to improve your craft.
Heather, I really agree with that. Nikki, what do you think about it?
I agree. I sometimes have a tendency of having a hard time purchasing a craft book unless someone has recommended it that I trust or know, because they can all be so different. And even then, you don't really necessarily know what you're going to get. But thing that I've learned about myself in craft books, and I've gotten better over the past decade plus that I've been writing, but especially in the beginning, the most persuasive way to not put my seat in the chair and actually write words is determine that it's imperative that I read this craft book and that craft book before I even begin the process, because then it's going to be a waste of time. And basically it ends up being a really clever way to procrastinate. And I'm not saying don't read craft books, but I would really be honest with yourself. This is where a critique partner or accountability partner, or even someone that's not a writer that you live with, that could be like, hey, have you written this week, or whatever your goals are? Because I think that's easy to do. And so sometimes I think the best time to read a craft book is when you're actually like deep in your work in progress or revising or something like that, or you're still meeting whatever word goal it is. Because the bottom line is no craft book substitutes the act of actually writing. That's where you really learn the craft.
One thing that I love doing actually is I'm a novel writer, not always, but when I write a novel, I love to, after my first draft, read a craft book because it gives me time to be away from that novel, which I need. And it also gives me a way to improve the novel once I've read the craft book. It like gives me a new focus. It gives me a way to improve the prose or whatever I've read about. Usually I can use that to make my novel better.
I love that suggestion, Heather. I think that's a great way to use one because you've got the project there and you want to improve it. And then you've got the tool chest in the book to try and help. So I think that's a great way to approach using a craft book. I know sometimes if I sit down and I'm not like you, Nikki, I'm like, I don't want to read the craft book. until I've got this mess of a manuscript in front of me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to read the craft book."
Sure. And I think, like we talked about, there's all different types of craft books, right? Or about writing. Some
Yeah.
are about the process and are more about encouragement or attributes of being a creator. And others
Mhm.
are like, if you want to write a thriller, they're specific to genre. And some, I mean, I know we've
Yeah.
had guests on our show, like a thesaurus you're going to use, or I know Cheryl Klein's book, it's like a workshop book like you're while you're working. There is a place, right, to have craft books around, but it's interesting.
So what are your favorites, guys?
Yeah, Heather,
Who
what's
wants Yeah, Heather, you go
you
first.
start?
Tell us your favorites.
I think so. This is not going to count for one of my three,
Okay.
but I want to start with it because I feel like all good writing should start with knowing the English
Mm.
language.
That does help. If we're
And
writing in English, it definitely helps, yeah.
yeah, this was the very first craft book I ever read. And I read it when I was a very new writer and I was just getting into things. And I had written my very first novel and I thought it was brilliant. And then I read, it's called The Elements of
Mhm.
Style by Strunk and
Yeah.
White. And it has been around for over 100 years. And it is like the foundational craft book. And the reason I loved it was because I didn't realize that I didn't know how to use a comma.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that I didn't know how to use phrases, you know. And I think that reading it after I read it, this was my very first time having written a book and then reading a craft book. And it gave me this perspective of, okay, I have a lot of work to do. Like, I loved this process, I loved doing it, but I have a lot of work to do and I have a lot to learn. And it helped me to see that I had a lot of good in my manuscript, but I also had places where I could actually improve it. And so I think that is an amazing book to start out with. It's just fundamental and it really teaches you the rules of language, not specifically for breaking the rules, but once you know the rules really well, then you can start knowing when you should be breaking the rules.
Yeah. I think
Um,
Strunk and White is also just everybody needs to have it because it's a good reference tool.
Mhm.
I was in journalism, and that's you have to have it. And I think
yeah.
every writer needs to have that one on your library shelf just to pull down and look stuff up.
So, Stephanie, what's your book? Your first book?
I love Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I really like it. To me, mm, it's really
Because you sold some novels.
well, I'm trying.
And
But I
who's the
just
author, Stephanie?
the author is Jessica Brody, and is taken from the book about Save the Cat, which is about screenwriting. And so Jessica Brody has taken this story and uses the elements of screenwriting to write a novel. And it talks about beats. And that was something I really didn't understand about the importance of beats. And I know that sounds like what the heck is a beat? Because you have plot points and all sorts of things. But the beats are like in a drama or in a movie where you're watching and they're pivotal points, and they're pivotal points in every story, and you're going to be able to see those beats play out in every story. And so this takes that movie idea and translates it into how to find those beats that you need to have in your novel. And for me, that was just amazing to figure that out, because you always think it's like, oh yes, writing a novel, it's in your head and it's I'm being so creative and everything. And then it's like this drunken white. There are actually rules to storytelling. Oh. And that light bulb moment when you're like, oh, I can find these beats in every good story. And the stories that are lacking something are probably missing one of the beats. So to me, this is for me, it was a very found understanding of the structure of story and how to use that structure in writing a novel. So I love it. It's wonderful. And you can see that mine has been like dipped in water and used a lot. So it's,
Iced
but
tea stains,
yeah,
whatever.
it's got all sorts of things. I might actually eventually have to get another one. But the other thing that is nice about the structure of this one, you can sit down and read it straight through, but you can also dip into it when you're stuck and looking to see what's missing. Why is my story like in the saggy middle? What am I missing that what beat am I missing that needs to go into it? And some of the beats are like an opening image, setting up the story. It's if you're doing a rom com, there are certain, the meet cute has to be there. Those
Mhm.
points all have to be there in any novel that you're writing.
Mhm.
And so to me, that it was just eye opening. And then I realized how crappy some of my writing.
Oh, stop. Stephanie,
No.
stop.
Oh, no, I understand. You know that. You know that.
It
You
is
look at some of the old ones
eye-opening.
and you're like, "Oh, that's why everybody said that one was terrible." Okay. Now I
Oh
know.
goodness.
Nikki, how about you? What's your
Well, this
first
was
one?
hard, right? To pick three. My first one is not about crafts specifically. It is called The Creative Habit, Learn It and Use It for Life. It's by Twyla Tharp, and she is an author, but she is a ballerina and choreographer. I was in a place where I wanted to even dig into my career as a writer,
Mhm.
and I wanted to get creative habits and try and just see different things that maybe I'm missing from a different perspective. And she has exercises and things in there that you can do, but some of the things that I've taken is something as simple as, okay, I have all these works in progress. Some of them are published, some's on contract. There's stuff's everywhere. And I am a pencil first draft writer. So I not everything I have on a project's in my computer. And so there's a lot of paper, and I'm a visual. So there's maps and objects and stuff like that. And she talks about this organization system with banker boxes, and it has been huge. I know my husband and family are thrilled because my office is not a complete disaster now. And when I want to go to a project, it's all in a box now.
Mhm.
And that visual of I am done with this story right now and I close the lid has been really great as you're going back, because sometimes you're in the revision, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
you're in the drafting, stuff like that. So this book has just been very helpful. There's lots of different ways, and she has great stories, and just it also talks a lot about discipline. And no, like she gets up and gets a cab and is at her gym in Manhattan by 5 a.m. every morning. She's, no, I don't want to work out every morning at 5 a.m. But if I don't, then I won't still be able to dance. And if I
Mhm.
can't dance, then I'm not going to be able to choreograph like I want to. And it's just that ripple effect. And I know there's times that we have to do things as writers that we don't want to do, but we want the end result. And I think the difference in one of the ways of being successful are the people that choose to do the hard things, and then it ends up paying off. So highly recommend this book if you're feeling like you just want some more structure and ideas.
I think I need to
Yeah.
read that. Sounds good.
It is
What
good. You
about
are
you,
welcome
Heather?
to borrow it.
Besides Drunk and White, Heather, what are
Yes.
you going to tell us about?
I think my next one that I want to talk about is similar to Nikki's. So it's not about craft, it's about your mental well being or your creative well being,
Mhm.
really. And it's called The Creative
Hmm.
Act, A Way of Being. And it's by Rick Rubin.
Mm.
And I absolutely love this book. You can just open to any page and you will feel filled.
Hmm. Cool.
I just love this book because it's one of the kind of things where let me just read part of this. It says nothing in this book is known to be true. It's a reflection on what I've noticed, not facts so much as thoughts. Some ideas may resonate, others may not. A few may awaken an inner knowing you forgot you had. Use what's helpful, let go of the rest. Each of these moments is an invitation to further inquiry, looking deeper, zooming out or in, opening possibilities for a new way of being.
Mm,
And that really is what this book is
nice.
about. And it goes and it talks about nothing is static. How do you look inward? How do you the purpose of art?
Yeah.
What is your purpose for art?
Mhm.
And it's just like a way of really evaluating why you're doing this. And it is just, I constantly keep it with me because whenever I'm feeling low or upset or like, oh, I just wrote a really terrible first draft or whatever, I just open this and I can find a way to feel better about what I've
Oh,
done.
Oh, that's great.
And so I really highly recommend this book. It's one of my favorites.
that's awesome.
That sounds great.
Stephanie, what's your next one?
Actually, we're following along. The next one I have is Story Genius by Lisa
Mm.
Crone. And Lisa Crone uses current brain science and talks to us about why people love story, why humans are
Hmm.
wired for story. It's how we learn, it's how we absorb the world, how we learn about other people, and our brains are just completely wired to take in story and to put story out. It's essential as humans. And it's just so interesting. And then she takes that brain science and translates it into how to build emotional arc and emotional connection in your stories so that the reader can connect to that essential story that you're telling. So it's very character centric development where you're really working with your main character and all the other characters and their emotional needs. And then you're pitting their emotional needs against your plot.
Ooh,
And so it gets really down in the weeds, but
it's
I
a thinker.
it is. It's not one of those books that you're going to sit down and read in an afternoon. To me, it's brilliant because it I do feel that we as humans, that is how we perceive the world. Even when I was teaching, I taught in stories to kids for them to be able to understand. And I think if you go to church or your synagogue, we're telling stories to each other to relate. And so I do think that there's something, our brains really are wired for story and being able to take that wiring that is intrinsic in most of us and use it to create beautiful story. I think it's very powerful. I'm not saying that I can use all of it because it's pretty deep. And my brain can only take in so much of it at a time. But I love the challenge of it. And I love just the idea of the philosophy of story and how we can relate to story as humans, each one of us. So,
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
yeah, it's a great book. You will need a while to read
That's
it.
fair. Soak it all in.
Yes. I go back and reread a few times to get it, but it's so worth it and it's really good. And for me, I really feel like it's helping me to get to more of the emotional aspects of
Hmm.
characters. And
That's what I was
yeah,
thinking. The internalization that you need so badly in story that really resonates with
yeah.
people.
Hmm.
And so that's where it's really helping. That's what's helping me is to understand how that personal, emotional aspect needs to come through. It's not just about your plot, but your plot effects and your emotions. They have to go together. And you're building an emotional arc and you're building the story arc and they need to intersect. It gets
Wow.
complicated, but it's just so interesting. I don't know.
It's very cool.
So anyway,
Very
she's
cool.
genius, pretty much story genius. Lisa Crone is pretty much a genius in my book too for writing.
Nikki, what's your next book?
My next book is called The Courage to Write How Writers Transcend Fear
Oh, I like that
by
one.
Ralph Keyes. And I got this book in the last year when I was needing courage to figure out directionally where I was going to go and make some tough choices. And this book, Ralph is funny. and he's smart, and he really makes you ask yourself the hard questions. But he does it in a way that he's also showing that every creator and author is trying to find the courage to write, whether it's their first book or their 100th. And Lawrence Block writes this endorsement and says, facing one's deepest fears reside at the very heart of any creative act. And Ralph Keyes has written thoughtfully and well about the roles of fear and courage in the writing process. Bravo. And it just really helps you just dig deep into what fear might look like, how we deal with fear, and how to press on, and to use that fear almost as a catalyst, because it keeps you going, and it keeps you vulnerable. And as a reader, usually the best work we read and the books we enjoy more is when there's this sense of vulnerability and authenticity. And so I'm a huge fan of this book. Like Story Genius, I could only read like a chapter at a time because there was so much self-reflection going on that I couldn't take it. You know what I mean?
It's a good book then.
Yes, it
Yeah.
really makes you answer questions for yourself
I
and
think
dig
books
deep.
that make you
So,
pause and dig deep, those are
yes.
good books. Yeah. I've read that one. It's been a while, a little bit, but it's a good one.
Yes. So, Heather, what do you have up next?
All right, my next one is called Steering the Craft by Ursula Le Guin.
Oh, I haven't read it.
And this is one of those books that you can read in an afternoon. It's not even that long, but you'll want to read it again. Like, this is a book that you'll have on your shelf for a very long time, and you'll just keep going back to it. Because what I love about this book is it's only 10 chapters. But again, it takes you back to the fundamental components of narrative. And it's like everything from sentence construction. How does language sound? That's the first chapter, and I love that chapter. This is one of the reasons, and you hear it all the time. People say, oh, you should read your book to yourself or have someone read it to you, because language has this sound to it, and your words have a certain sound. And anyway, so that's part of it. There's a chapter on point of view. And the other thing that I really love about it is that, for one, Ursula Le Guin is funny. She has like this funny commentary. And then she also has an exercise that you can do either by yourself or in a group. And if you actually do the exercises, which I highly recommend, you can practice it. And then I think that when you do these things, you do these exercises, then when you are writing your story, those things just become a natural part of the way that you write. And once you get really good at it, you don't even realize you're doing it because you're just already mastered it. And I feel like these fundamentals of writing are just really amazing. And I've really enjoyed going back to this book over and over.
That's great.
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Okay.
You have another thinker?
No. This one is really fun. I've been reading this one because I am determined one of these days I'm going to have a cozy mystery series out there. So you just wait and see. It's going to happen. So this is Writing the Cozy Mystery. I love cozy mysteries. I love reading them. I love everything about it. And this is by Nancy J. Cohen. It's an easy read, but it's one of those just foundational, okay, these are the things you've got to have in a cozy mystery. And I love this right here. There are the 8 C's of a cozy mystery. You need to have crime, clues, characters, canines, cooking, crafts, cats, and chuckles. And I'm like,
great.
this is exact.
No chocolate?
Well, that could be in your cooking, but we could add chocolate.
Others adding a C.
We can add a C or 2. But I was like,
I need to talk to this author.
This is exactly why I love reading cozy mysteries, and I'm just determined to write one because I'm in love with them.
That's awesome.
Um, but she goes through and talks about the character arcs and just the essentials that you do need because it's a genre that readers have expectations for a cozy mystery. And if you do not have a cozy mystery that is
Absolutely.
going to have maybe not a happy but a satisfying ending in it, and you got to have a little bit of romance in there. There's just all the component parts that readers are expecting. And I think she does a great job in setting it up for an author. If you want to learn about this genre, this is a good down and dirty book about the genre and the things that you need to include if you're going to attempt to write a cozy mystery, which I'm attempting at some point in time. Soon. Very soon.
We're going to hold you to that and cheer you on.
I want to so bad. So, anyways, what about okay? So, Nikki, what you got coming next?
I'm gonna cheat, and mine's a 2-for-1 deal, but these
Cheat.
are audio. I know these are audiobooks, and this first one, On Writing by Stephen King, I highly
Okay, I like
recommend
that
you
one.
listen to the audio because he is the narrator of his own
Mm,
book, and I had no idea he was so funny. I've probably listened to this book at least 5 times, different times in my career. It is about craft, but it's also about the process and longevity and putting the time in. And I don't know, hope. It's very good. And he's honest and clever. And I highly recommend it. And the other audiobook is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I had never read any of her work. This was my first one from her that I had read, and I listened to it early in my career. And there's an example in there that they give about essentially time management and excuses of why you say, "Oh, I've always wanted to write a book," and it never happens. And I almost got in a car accident because it spoke to me so like basically the person you have to listen to the whole thing to get the context, but basically someone's, oh, you want to write a book, yeah, but I don't have time. And it's, oh, you don't watch TV, you don't, no, I watch TV. Oh, you don't see your friends, no, I see friends. You don't go to concerts, no, I go to concerts. And it's just it hits you over the head, and it just was very pivotal that I realized I had a choice to make. Am I going to
mhm,
make excuses? And this goes for really anything in our lives,
it
right? We all have
does.
different circumstances, but I'm either going to talk about being a writer and wanting to write, or I'm going to do it. And I'm very grateful for that because I know not everyone likes it being delivered to them that way, but I'm a big fan of candor. And so it was just raw and there, and I totally embraced it. And there's just a lot of good nuggets in there just about ideas. And so that was another good one. So sorry I cheated, but I think it was worth it.
All right.
Will you forgive me, Heather and
We'll
Stephanie?
try.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, Heather,
Is
you got
that
one more for us? Or did you do all three of yours?
No, I
Oh,
got one
good.
more.
Okay.
I knew that you guys would not do a nonfiction one. So I did. This one is called The Sense of Style. And it is focused toward the nonfiction writer,
Hmm.
but even in fiction writing, it will improve your prose. It is basically a book all about how to write vivid, elegant prose. And one of his kind of premises in this book is that when you can create this vivid imagery in your book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that you will essentially become a good writer. Because one other thing that he talks about is that, and I think this is where the nonfiction aspect comes in, is that you need to talk to people who don't understand your
Yeah.
specific subject matter. You need to talk as if you were a
Mm.
normal person, not an expert, and things like that. But it's just a lot of ways that writers can approach their work as if they're in this conversation with a reader rather than talking at them. And I think that's really, it's a really good thing. And it also talks about, one of my favorite things about it too, is that it talks about how you go through and write. Yes, you go through and do your first draft and nobody has to see that. But then you can go back and reverse engineer your prose to become really, really powerful. Yeah. And I just love it. I think that it's one of the ways that, for me, it's freeing to write a first draft, knowing that I can go back and reverse engineer my prose and I can go back and I can do whatever I need to it. So it, for me, was one of the books that kind of freed me of being afraid of the blank page, because I was able to say, okay, it doesn't matter what I write in the first one. I'm just going to get the basics down. I'm going to get my basic plot, my basic characters, and then I can go back and I can fix everything right down to every word, every punctuation mark. I can go fix it. So I love editing anyways. And so I think that's part of what drew me to this book, but also it's really excellent for nonfiction writers.
I love that, because that's something that I think, I don't know. When I started writing, I thought you had to have like perfect the first time
Yeah.
out. You feel like it's then you're just going to tweak it a little bit, and that's so paralyzing. And I love that idea of being able to go back and you can fix it. And that's, I don't know, editing is powerful.
It really is powerful.
It really is. And so we're going to have all the names of all these books in our show notes so that everybody can get them, because I have a couple I'm going to have to get now myself too.
Absolutely. And we want to hear about your favorites too. So we'll definitely be talking about that on social media. And don't forget to think about one of these books or our upcoming retreat as an upcoming gift idea. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.